Tom. There you are again. It feels like we just finished our last episode, and here we are meeting again for another English practice session. How are you doing today?
Hey, Emily, I'm doing really well, and it's great to see you again, too. I was actually wondering what kind of situation we were going to talk about today, because every time we meet, you somehow bring up a situation that I have experienced in real life.
Well, I think that's because real life gives us the best English lessons. Today, we're going to talk about something that people may need when they're traveling, living in another country, or simply dealing with an everyday problem. And that is going to be going to the pharmacy.
Oh, that's a very useful topic, because going to a pharmacy can be a little stressful when you don't know how to explain what you need in English, especially when the pharmacist asks you several questions and you're trying to remember the right words at the same time.
Exactly. And that's why today's episode is called Useful English at the Pharmacy, Listening and Speaking Practice. We're going to focus on practical English that you can actually use when you're talking to a pharmacist, asking about medicine, explaining a simple problem, or trying to understand instructions.
And we're not going to make this sound like a medical textbook, because that's probably the last thing someone wants to listen to when they're trying to learn everyday English.
Definitely. We're going to keep the English natural and realistic, just like two people would actually speak when they walk into a pharmacy and need some help.
So if someone walks into a pharmacy and says, "I need medicine," is that enough?
People may understand you, but we can make it more natural and useful. You could say something like, "Hi, I'm looking for something for a headache."
That's much better, because you're telling the pharmacist exactly what kind of problem you're trying to deal with.
Right, and the pharmacist may then ask you a question, such as, "How long have you had the headache?"
And that's where listening becomes really important, because you need to understand the question before you can give a useful answer.
Exactly. You might say, "I've had it since this morning," or "I've had it for about 2 days."
So we're not just learning vocabulary today, we're practicing the whole conversation from the moment you enter the pharmacy until you understand what the pharmacist tells you.
Yes, and we're also going to practice what to say when you don't understand something, because that's a very important part of real communication.
That's true. Sometimes people are afraid to say they don't understand because they think their English isn't good enough, so they just smile and say, "Okay."
And then they walk out of the pharmacy thinking, "Wait a minute, what did that person just tell me?"
Exactly. I've done that before, and it wasn't a great strategy.
At least you're honest.
Very honest. So today, if you don't understand something, you can practice saying, "Sorry, could you say that again, please?"
Or you can say, "Could you explain that a little more simply, please?" That's especially useful when someone uses a word you don't know.
And if you want to make sure you understood the instructions correctly, you can repeat the information and ask, "So should I take this after meals?"
Exactly. Repeating the important information is actually a very good communication habit.
I think that's something learners should remember, because sometimes the most important part of a conversation isn't speaking a lot, it's making sure you understood the other person correctly.
Absolutely. And that's especially important in a pharmacy because you want to understand how to use a product safely and correctly.
Right. So today's lesson isn't about trying to sound advanced. It's about being clear, listening carefully, and asking questions when you need more information.
That's the main idea, and we're going to practice several realistic situations, such as asking for something for a headache, asking about a cough or cold, explaining how long you've had a problem, asking about how to use a product, and asking questions when you're not sure about something.
That sounds useful, because those are situations that can happen to almost anyone.
Exactly. And there's another thing I want our learners to practice today, describing a problem in simple English.
You mean instead of trying to remember a complicated medical word?
Yes, you don't always need a complicated word. You can often explain the situation with simple English.
For example, instead of trying to remember a difficult word, I could say, "I have a sore throat and it hurts when I swallow."
Perfect. That's clear and natural.
Or I could say, "I've been coughing a lot since yesterday."
Exactly. Or I have a runny nose and a slight fever.
So the important thing is to explain what you're experiencing clearly.
Yes, and the pharmacist may ask follow-up questions to understand what you need.
For example, they might ask, "Do you have any allergies?"
And you can answer, no, I don't have any known allergies. Or if you do have allergies, you can explain them clearly.
They might also ask, are you taking any other medication?
And that's another question you should listen to carefully and answer honestly.
This makes the conversation feel much more realistic because it's not just one person asking for medicine and the other person handing something over.
Exactly. A real conversation usually has several questions and answers, and that's what we're going to practice.
Emily, I have a question. What if someone walks into a pharmacy and doesn't even know what they need?
That's actually a good situation to practice. You can simply explain the problem and ask for help.
So I could say, hi, I'm not sure what I need, but I have a bad cough. Could you recommend something?
Yes, that's a very natural way to start the conversation.
And the pharmacist may then ask several questions.
Right. They might ask how long you've had the cough, whether you have a fever, whether you're taking any other medicine, or whether you have any allergies.
And instead of becoming nervous because there are many questions, we can answer one question at a time.
Exactly. That's how real conversations work. You don't have to prepare a long speech before you enter the pharmacy.
That's actually a relief.
Yes. Imagine walking into a pharmacy and giving the pharmacist a 5-minute speech before they even ask you a question.
Good morning. Before we begin, let me explain my entire medical history.
Please don't do that.
Okay. I'll keep it simple.
That's the point. Keep it simple, clear, and honest.
Another useful sentence is, I'm looking for something for...
Yes, that's a great sentence pattern because you can use it for many common situations.
I'm looking for something for a headache.
I'm looking for something for a sore throat.
I'm looking for something for a cough.
And you can also say, do you have anything for a cold?
That's very natural.
Yes, and learners can practice changing just one word while keeping the same sentence structure.
That's a good way to practice speaking because you're not memorizing 20 completely different sentences.
Exactly. You're learning a useful pattern that you can reuse.
What about asking about price?
That's important too. You can say, how much is this? Or how much does this cost?
And if you're comparing two products, you could ask, what's the difference between these two?
That's a very useful question because sometimes you may see several products and not know which one is appropriate for your situation.
Then the pharmacist can explain the difference.
Yes, and if the explanation is too fast, you can politely ask them to repeat it.
Sorry, could you speak a little more slowly, please?
Perfect. That's exactly the kind of sentence we want learners to feel comfortable using.
Because speaking English confidently doesn't mean understanding every single word immediately.
Right. Confidence means knowing what to do when you don't understand.
That's an important difference.
And today's listening practice will help with that because I'm going to speak naturally and Tom will respond naturally, so you'll hear how a real conversation moves from one question to another.
And everyone listening can pause the episode whenever they want and repeat our sentences aloud.
Yes, don't just listen passively.
Speak with us.
Repeat the whole sentence, not only one word.
And try to copy the rhythm and pronunciation.
Exactly. If I say, could you tell me how to use this, please? Don't just repeat, use this.
Repeat the complete sentence.
And then try saying it without looking at the screen.
That's when you really start training your speaking ability.
Absolutely. Another thing we want to practice is polite language.
Because when you're asking for help, saying, give me this, may sound too direct.
Right. Instead, you can say, could I have this, please? Or could you help me find something for a cough?
Adding please and using could can make the conversation sound much more polite.
And that's useful not only at a pharmacy, but also at restaurants, hotels, shops, airports, and many other places.
So this episode may be about pharmacy English, but we're actually practicing communication skills that you can use in many everyday situations.
Exactly. That's why I really like this topic.
Me too. And I think we're ready to start our first situation.
Before we begin, let's imagine the situation clearly. You're traveling in another country, you've had a simple problem since yesterday, and you decide to visit a local pharmacy.
You walk through the door, look around, and see several products on the shelves.
Then the pharmacist notices you and says, hello, can I help you?
And now it's your turn to speak.
You don't need to panic.
You don't need perfect English.
Just start with something simple.
Hi, I'm looking for something for a headache.
And that's how the conversation begins.
From there, we'll show you how to answer the pharmacist's questions naturally.
We'll also show you how to ask questions of your own, how to check that you understood the instructions, and how to finish the conversation politely.
So everyone, get ready to listen carefully because we're going to make this as realistic as possible.
And remember, if you hear a sentence that you think you could use in real life, pause the lesson and repeat it several times.
Don't worry about making mistakes.
Your first goal is communication.
Your second goal is confidence.
And with regular practice, both will improve.
All right, Emily, I think we're ready.
Yes, Tom. Let's walk into the pharmacy and see how our conversation goes.
Hopefully, we won't spend 20 minutes trying to pronounce one word.
If we do, we'll just practice it together.
Fair enough.
Okay, everyone, let's begin our first real-life pharmacy conversation. Okay, Tom, let's start with one of the most common situations. Imagine you've just walked into a pharmacy because you've had a headache since this morning, and the pharmacist comes over and asks, "Can I help you?"
I would probably say, yes, please. I'm looking for something for a headache. I've had it since this morning, and I'm hoping you can recommend something.
That's a very natural way to begin, because you're clearly explaining what you need instead of simply saying, "I need medicine."
Right. And the pharmacist may then ask, how long have you had the headache?
You can answer, "I've had it since this morning," or if it started yesterday, you could say, "I've had it since yesterday."
And if you had it for several days, you could say, I've had it for about 3 days.
Exactly. Notice that we're practicing a useful sentence pattern rather than memorizing one sentence. Once you understand the pattern, you can change the information depending on your situation.
Then the pharmacist might ask, do you have any other symptoms?
If you don't have any other symptoms, you can simply say, "No, I don't think so. I just have a headache and feel a little tired."
And if you have another simple symptom, you can explain it clearly, such as, I also have a sore throat, or I've been coughing a little.
That's right. You don't need to give a long explanation. Just answer the question clearly and let the pharmacist ask for more information if they need it.
What if the pharmacist speaks too quickly and I don't understand the question?
Then don't pretend you understood. You can politely say, "Sorry, could you say that again more slowly, please?"
That's probably one of the most useful sentences for English learners because it gives you time to understand what's happening.
Exactly. And remember, asking someone to repeat something isn't a failure. It's a normal part of conversation, especially when you're speaking with someone who has a different accent or speaks faster than you're used to.
The pharmacist might then repeat the question more slowly and I can answer it.
Yes, and if you still don't understand a particular word, you can ask, "What does that mean?"
That's simple enough to remember.
And that's the kind of English we want to practice today. Simple sentences that help you communicate when you actually need them.
Let's say the pharmacist asks, are you allergic to any medications?
If you know that you aren't, you can say, "No, I don't have any known medication allergies."
And if you're not sure, you shouldn't guess.
Exactly. You should give accurate information about yourself and ask the pharmacist what you should do if you're unsure.
So the conversation might continue with the pharmacist asking questions and me giving short but complete answers.
Right. Then, once the pharmacist understands what you're looking for, you might want to ask about the product.
I could say, how should I use this?
Yes. You could also ask, "How often should I take it?" if the pharmacist is recommending a medicine that has specific directions.
And if the product is something like a cream or spray, I could ask, how should I apply it? Or how should I use the spray?
Exactly. The important thing is to listen carefully to the instructions and make sure you understand them.
What if I forget the instructions a few minutes later?
That's why it's perfectly reasonable to ask again. You could say, "Sorry, could you go over the instructions one more time?"
That's much better than leaving the pharmacy and realizing I have no idea what I was supposed to do.
Exactly. We don't want to walk out confidently and then look at the package 5 minutes later like it's written in another language.
I've definitely had moments like that.
I think most people have.
So the main lesson in part 1 is that when you go to a pharmacy, start with a clear explanation of what you need, answer the pharmacist's questions honestly, and don't be afraid to ask for clarification.
Exactly. You don't need advanced English. You need useful English that helps you have a clear conversation.
Emily, let's move to another realistic situation. Imagine the pharmacist shows you 2 different products and explains that both may be suitable for different purposes.
That's actually a situation that can make English learners nervous because there may be unfamiliar words on the packaging.
So instead of simply choosing one because the box looks nice, I could ask, what's the difference between these two?
That's an excellent question, and one that you can use in many places, not just pharmacies.
The pharmacist might explain the difference, but what if the explanation is too complicated for me?
Then you can say, could you explain that in a simpler way, please?
I like that because you're not saying I don't understand English.
Right, you're simply telling the other person what you need. That's a much more useful approach.
And if I understand most of the explanation, but I'm confused about one detail, I can ask a specific question.
Exactly. For example, you could say, does this need to be taken with food? Or should I use this before or after meals?
Yes, depending on the product and the instructions you're given.
What about asking how long I should use something?
You can ask, how long should I use this? Or how long should I continue using this?
Those are useful because sometimes the instructions aren't immediately obvious to a learner.
And if you're buying something for someone else, you should explain that clearly too.
For example, I'm looking for something for my son. He's been coughing since yesterday.
Exactly. Or, I'm looking for something for my mother and I'd like to ask what options are available.
Then the pharmacist may ask questions about the person you're buying it for.
Yes, and you should listen carefully and give accurate information.
This is where our listening practice becomes really important, because the pharmacist may not use exactly the same words that we practiced.
That's true. In real life, people say the same idea in different ways.
Someone might ask, when did it start?
Another person might ask, how long has this been happening?
And another person might say, how long have you had these symptoms?
The wording is different, but the basic idea is similar.
So learners shouldn't only memorize one question and expect everyone to say it exactly the same way.
Exactly. You should learn to recognize the meaning, not only the exact words.
That's probably one of the biggest differences between textbook English and real-life English.
Yes, in a textbook, you might see one perfect sentence, but in real life, people naturally change their wording.
And that's why listening practice matters.
Absolutely. The more different ways you hear common questions, the easier it becomes to understand people.
Let's say I don't know how to pronounce the name of a product.
You don't have to struggle with it. You can simply point to the product and ask, could you tell me how to pronounce this?
That's useful. Or if you're unsure whether something is available, you can ask, do you have this in stock?
And if they don't have it, I could ask, is there something similar?
Exactly. That's a very practical sentence.
What about the price?
You can ask, how much is this? Or how much does this cost?
And if there are two options, I can ask, which one is less expensive?
Yes, although when you're discussing medicines or health-related products, price shouldn't be the only thing you consider. It's better to ask the pharmacist about the appropriate option for your situation.
Good point.
Another useful phrase is, I'd like to make sure I understand correctly.
Then I can repeat the information. So I should use it twice a day, is that right?
Exactly. That shows you're listening carefully and checking your understanding.
And if the pharmacist says yes, I know that I've understood the instruction correctly.
Right. This habit is useful in many situations where accurate understanding matters.
So it's really about becoming an active listener instead of just waiting for your turn to speak.
Exactly. Listen to the question, understand what information the person needs, answer clearly, and ask questions when something isn't clear.
That sounds simple, but it's actually a very important communication skill.
And once you practice it enough, you'll notice that conversations become much easier. Tom, let's imagine that you've already explained your problem and received some information from the pharmacist, but you still have one or two questions before you leave.
Then I shouldn't be afraid to ask them. I could say, before I go, could I ask you one more question?
That's a very natural way to introduce another question without suddenly changing the subject.
Then I might ask, is there anything I should avoid while I'm using this?
That's a useful question, although the exact advice depends on the product and your personal situation, so you should listen to the pharmacist's explanation carefully.
Right. We're practicing the English here, not trying to replace professional medical advice.
Exactly. The goal is to help you communicate with pharmacy staff clearly and confidently.
Let's say the pharmacist gives me several instructions, but I only remember some of them.
You can ask them to repeat the main instructions. For example, could you repeat the main instructions, please?
Or could you write that down for me?
Yes, that's particularly useful if there are several details you need to remember.
And if I have a question about the packaging, I can point to the box and ask, what does this part mean?
Exactly. You don't need to know the vocabulary before you ask. Sometimes pointing to the information you're asking about makes the conversation much easier.
What if the pharmacist recommends that I see a doctor?
Then it's important to listen carefully and understand what they're telling you. You can ask, "Do you think I should see a doctor?"
And if I don't understand why, I can politely ask, could you explain why you recommend that?
Yes, asking questions is better than leaving with confusion.
This is actually something learners can use everywhere. If someone gives you information that affects what you need to do next, make sure you understand it.
Exactly. Good communication isn't about speaking as much as possible. It's about making sure both people understand each other.
After everything is clear, I can pay and then say, thank you for your help.
And the pharmacist may say, "You're welcome. Take care."
Then I can say, thank you, have a good day.
That's a simple and natural ending.
But before we finish, let's imagine one more situation. I leave the pharmacy, but then realize I forgot to ask an important question.
That's okay. If you're still nearby, you can go back and say, "Excuse me, I have one more question."
That's much better than worrying about it silently.
Exactly.
Emily, I think there's another important lesson here. Sometimes English learners think they need to speak long sentences to sound fluent.
Yes, but that's not always true. In a pharmacy, a short, clear sentence can be much more useful than a long sentence with mistakes.
For example, I have a sore throat is clear.
"I've had it since yesterday" gives useful information.
Could you recommend something tells the pharmacist what we need.
And "Could you explain how to use this?" helps us understand the instructions.
So each sentence has a clear purpose.
Exactly. That's what makes practical English powerful.
You don't need to impress the pharmacist with complicated vocabulary.
You just need to communicate what you need.
And listen carefully to the response.
Yes.
If you don't understand, ask again.
If you're unsure, clarify.
If you need help, ask politely.
And if someone helps you, say thank you.
That's a pretty good communication system.
Very simple, but very effective.
And I think that's what makes this kind of English practice useful for travelers and English learners.
Absolutely. You may never know exactly what situation you'll face while traveling, but if you know how to start a conversation, ask questions, explain a problem, and request clarification, you'll be much more prepared.
And you can use the same skills in a hotel, restaurant, airport, shop, or even at work.
That's why I always recommend learning English through situations rather than only learning isolated vocabulary.
Because when you learn a word inside a real conversation, you understand how and when to use it.
Exactly.
Emily, I think we've covered a lot today, and I really like the way this lesson focused on conversations instead of just giving learners a list of pharmacy vocabulary.
Me too, because when you're standing inside a pharmacy, you don't need to remember 50 difficult words. You need to know how to explain what you need and how to understand the person helping you.
So let's quickly remember some of the most useful sentences from today's practice.
You can start with, "I'm looking for something for a headache."
You can explain how long you've had a problem by saying, "I've had it since yesterday," or "I've had it for about 2 days."
If you want to ask for a recommendation, you can say, "Could you recommend something for this?"
If you don't understand what the pharmacist says, you can ask, "Could you say that again more slowly, please?"
If you want more information, you can say, "Could you explain that a little more simply, please?"
If you're unsure about instructions, you can ask, "How should I use this?"
And you can check your understanding by saying, "So I should use it twice a day, is that right?"
If you want to compare two products, you can ask, "What's the difference between these two?"
And if you need to know the price, you can simply ask, "How much does this cost?"
These sentences may look simple, but they're extremely useful when you're actually trying to communicate.
Exactly. And remember that confidence doesn't mean speaking without mistakes.
Confidence means being willing to speak even when you're not completely sure.
It means knowing that if you don't understand something, you can ask again.
It means knowing that if someone speaks too quickly, you can politely ask them to slow down.
And it means knowing that you don't have to translate every sentence in your head before you speak.
That's a really important point.
Try to learn useful phrases as complete expressions. Then, when you need them, you can use them more naturally.
For example, don't only memorize the word recommend.
Learn the complete pattern. Could you recommend something for?
Don't only memorize the word difference.
Learn, what's the difference between these two?
Don't only memorize explain.
Learn, Could you explain that again, please?
That's a much more practical way to build speaking confidence.
And now it's your turn. Don't just listen to this lesson once and move on.
Choose 5 sentences that you think you'll actually use.
Write them down, listen to them again, and say them aloud several times.
Then try saying them without looking at the screen.
And finally, imagine yourself standing in a real pharmacy and use the sentences in your own conversation.
You can even change the details.
Instead of saying, I'm looking for something for a headache, you can practice, I'm looking for something for a sore throat.
Or, I'm looking for something for a cough.
This simple practice helps you become more flexible when speaking English, because real conversations don't always follow a script. Exactly. You need to understand the situation and respond naturally.
And that's what we're trying to help you do through these lessons.
Learn English that you can actually use.
English for travel.
English for everyday problems.
English for asking questions.
And English for communicating with confidence.
So everyone, thank you for spending this time with us today.
We hope this pharmacy conversation helped you improve both your listening and speaking skills.
Keep practicing, keep repeating, and don't be afraid to speak.
Your English doesn't have to be perfect before you start using it.
You improve by using it.
One sentence at a time.
One conversation at a time.
And one real-life situation at a time.
All right, Emily, I think we're ready to leave the pharmacy.
Yes, but this time, let's make sure we don't forget anything.
I have my wallet, my phone, and my English notes.
Good. Then we're ready.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Keep practicing your English, and we'll meet again in the next lesson.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye!
See you next time.